So about a year ago, I made a short discussing a Monster High theory I had regarding Frankie's connection to this mysterious scientist from Escape from Skull Shores. And with the second live-action Monster High movie coming out around the corner, I figured I would revisit this theory, because honestly it lives rent-free in my head. So hello internet, welcome to Toy Theory. Okay, I'll stop now. In Monster High Escape from Skull Shores, the gang from Monster High ends up on an island called Skull Shores. While there, they discover that some time ago there was a scientist who came to the island who happens to have an uncanny resemblance to Frankie, and it's not just a passing resemblance, multiple characters point this out, but by the end of the movie they never explain who this scientist was or why she looks like Frankie, which in my opinion is very unsatisfying. So let's theorize. In my original short, I explained how my theory is that Frankie's head came from this scientist, since it's not just that they look alike, they also have very similar features, like how they both have the same cheek scar but Frankie's has stitching over it. On top of that, the scientist and Frankie both share the same blue and green heterochromia, including which color is on which side of her head. I got a lot of great feedback on that short, including people putting their own theories forward, and many argue that it's not just her head that was reused for Frankie, but likely her whole body, which I think actually makes a lot of sense. Oftentimes we see with undead simulacrums that their body parts don't match with each other. The pieces will be different colors depending on how decayed the body parts are, and while Frankie's body is stitched together, it's all pretty uniform, and her skin is the same shade of green throughout. So I'd like to amend my theory in that this scientist somehow died in a very tragic way, possibly being dismembered in the process, and her body was eventually found, possibly after decaying a bit, but was taken back home and preserved, to eventually be used to make Frankie, and I've been doing research to see if I can corroborate this theory at all. Before I really dive into it though, I do want to say that in the original generation of Monster High, Mattel seemed pretty squeamish when it came to the more macabre aspects of these characters. About half of the cast or so are monsters that are typically considered undead, but Mattel kept trying to make excuses for why that's not the case for these characters, like claiming that Ghoulia was born a zombie rather than dying and turning into one.
We'll give you a bit of secret trivia about Ghoulia.
They were born zombies. Yeah, Ghoulia was born a zombie. She was born a zombie. She has a zombie mom and a zombie dad, and was a zombie toddler.
The same goes for Frankie, where Mattel went on record saying that she's made up of synthetic materials rather than cadaver parts. Personally, I would argue that if you're going to make a franchise about monsters, you kinda have to accept the uglier aspects of what that entails. And while I don't vibe with Generation 3 Monster High, I do appreciate that they did explain that these are undead characters, like Frankie actually being made up of different body parts. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be treating them like they are monsters who are undead.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Also in Freaky Fusion, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, one of the few parental figures we actually get to meet in the show, openly admits that he used guts and organs in his experiments.
You tried to create life using this, but you left out this.
You mean guts and organs and stuff? No, I used plenty of those. Look!
So we do have confirmation from the show proper of these darker elements. Sorry, Mattel. Some believe that this character is actually Frankie's mother, the bride of Frankenstein, whose name in Monster High is Vivica. The evidence for this theory coming from an article in the Gory Gazette, an in-universe newspaper, where they interview Frankie about spring break. Frankie explains that a month before the trip, she was discussing it with her parents, and while they were showing her an old picture book, a brochure from Skull Shores falls out of it. Vivica becomes extremely flustered by this, to the point where she's stumbling over her words and is constantly starting her sentences over. She eventually gives up and leaves the room, so her husband Victor has to explain what happened. Quick clarification, Victor in this case is Frankenstein's monster, so Dr. Frankenstein named his son after himself. What Victor tells Frankie doesn't actually match up with what we learn in Escape from Skull Shores. Monster High has always been pretty lax when it comes to its continuity. One notable example are the ages, like Draculaura celebrating her sweet 1600 multiple times throughout the series. Even in Escape from Skull Shores, there are some anachronistic aspects to it. I'm going to call the normie scientist Jane Doe from now on, since she's never given a name and I don't want to keep saying normie scientist. But in some scenes, Jane Doe is shown to have a mole, while in others it's missing. Maybe it's just makeup that got removed between scenes, but it would have been nice if they had been consistent with this. So maybe this article is just inconsistent with what we've seen in the movie, movie. But what if we come at it from a different angle? What if this article is actually giving us clues and missing pieces to the mystery of Skull Shores, and revealing that Jane Doe could in fact be Frankie Stein? Let me explain. First of all, Vivica is a simulacrum, the bride of Frankenstein, which they explain in Frankie's San Diego Comic-Con exclusive diary, while the scientist from Skull Shores was specified to be a normie.
That normie scientist looks a lot like Frankie.
According to the article, Frankie's father had the idea to go to Skull Shores as a vacation. Since they've been spending a lot of time in snowy environments, he thought it would be a good change of pace. And they were having such a good time that they were planning on extending their vacation. This implies that Vivica can't be Jane Doe, because Andy tells us that she came to the island with a group of scientists specifically to capture him, the Beast of Skull Shores.
A long time ago, that girl came here with scientists that wanted to capture me.
But she ended up befriending Andy, and eventually seems to have disappeared. He doesn't know what happened to her, so he started building these statues as a reminder. Meanwhile, it seems the Steins were not aware of his presence on the island at all. But maybe instead of this being inconsistent writing, these were two different trips with two different sets of people. A group of scientists looking to capture a rare monster, and the Steins who just wanted to have a nice vacation but ended up getting more than they bargained for. Barnaby Farnham, the villain of the movie, runs a freak show, and he wants to capture the Beast of Skull Shores to put him on display. Farnham has been after Andy for years, even though he's just a teenage boy who's minding his own business, and has likely tried this stunt several times. Victor says that there was a team there shooting a travel documentary, and they took a particular interest in Vivica, claiming that they treated her like a queen, just like how in Escape from Skull Shores they gave Frankie the royal treatment. Maybe they were shooting this documentary to try to make Skull Shores seem like a tropical paradise that tourists can come to, and they wanted women in particular so they could offer them to Andy, the way they did with Jane Doe and later Frankie. Victor says that despite planning on staying longer, they realized that things were not as they seemed, so they ended up leaving early, and refuses to elaborate. So something happened on Skull Shores to make them flee the island and never want to return, and also seems to have straight up traumatized Vivica. What if the Steins became suspicious the same way Laguna did in the movie, and ended up uncovering the plot to use Vivica as bait for Andy? That would explain why they left early. I don't think Jane Doe would just leave Andy behind without saying anything and knowing that there are people who are trying to exploit him. Personally, I think she died, and I have a theory as to how that might have happened. While investigating Farnham's ship, Laguna and Gil discover diagrams of traps that are laid all over the island. These are an attempt to capture Andy. The diagram shows that one of the traps is a spiked pit, which means that there are lethal traps on this island. What if Jane Doe accidentally stumbled into one of these traps, and that's how she passed away? She never actually left the island. Then later, the Steins come to the island for a vacation, only to end up getting more than they bargained for. And what if while they were investigating, they discovered the body of Jane Doe? Maybe Vivica thought that Jane Doe was killed by the ceremony. The film that Gil and Laguna watched gets corrupted right when Andy appears, so it looks like he's the one who hurt her. Maybe Vivica assumed that she would suffer the same fate. What if this finally explains the link between the Steins and this scientist? Because what if when they left the island, they took Jane Doe's body with them, and being mad scientists themselves, they reused her remains to eventually create Frankie? It might be a long shot, but I think it adds up. They go to Skull Shores just for fun, only to uncover a plot that their hosts are trying to summon this giant monster, discover the body of a girl who looks like she was murdered in a sacrificial ceremony to said monster, and now they want to use Vivica in that sacrificial ceremony. That might be enough to traumatize her. But maybe Vivica had a connection to Jane Doe, maybe even survivor's guilt. This girl who seems to have died in a ritual that Vivica was able to escape. So they take her remains back with them and use them to create Frankie, their beloved daughter who they vow to protect and care for. Even though Frankie doesn't have any memory of her previous life as a scientist and explorer, she still has a new lease on life. But hey, that's just a theory. A toy theory. Thanks for watching. I know I said I would stop. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I realize there are a lot of what ifs in this theory, but again, Victor refused to elaborate and was very vague about everything. But I think looking at this article in this light actually gives us clues that we've been looking for. At the very least, it gives the Steins a direct connection to Skull Shores, and that something tragic happened that left the Steins very upset by the situation, including traumatizing Vivica, and this would explain explain how the Steins came into possession of Jane Doe's body and why she looks like Frankie. While I don't believe we'll ever get a definitive answer on who Jane Doe actually is, it's fun to speculate, even though this was extremely dark. But what do you guys think of my theory? Do you think I'm onto something, or do you think it's too far-fetched? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Soundboy00, Owen Wildish, Player Zero, Kitsune Fiora, Lucas Geist, Data Dine Executive, Jay Draws, Blue Spirit, Bandito Bane, Lil, Meowsers, Sky, Jin KZ, Philip, Stutania, and Isaac Martinez. Thank you all so much for your support. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video and like our content, you can leave a like on the video and subscribe, and that part's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.